Arsenal comprehensively beat Ipswich on Easter Sunday to take another step towards wrapping up second place. Trossard bags a brace. Martinelli makes it 50 goals for the Arsenal. Why so many of us were wrong about Mikel Merino and more on today's episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Happy Monday. Hope you all had a wonderful Easter weekend. Whether you're celebrating or not, you get an extra couple of days off. Today, Friday, it's fantastic, isn't it? So, hope you all had a wonderful time. And if you've got plans for today, hope they go great as well. It's not great weather today here in North London. It's a little bit cloudy. It's a little bit gloomy. I think I'm going to use it as an excuse to stay home and watch a bit of WrestleMania from last night. No spoilers, please, because I don't know what happened. I've purposely avoided it. I'm not a massive WWE fan. I used to be when I was much, much younger. I have, as my wife says, grown out of it. But, you know, now and again, I like to dabble, and WrestleMania is always worth a bit of a watch, isn't it? So I'll be checking in with that a little bit later on in the day. Good morning to everybody in the live chat. Good to see plenty of you with us. Hope you're all well. We've got Green Rider who says, hi, Harry, here's a like even before you start. Thank you very much, mate. Really, really do appreciate that. Remember, likes really, really do help us in terms of growing the channel and all the rest of it. Junior Gunner is with us. We've got Isaac. We have got William. We've got Rumble. We've got Tom. We've got Steve. Jid says, how about that massive Kivor drop off? He's still banging the Jack of Kivor drum. Look, we'll talk about him in a bit. We've also got Olatunji in the chat and many, many, many more. As I say, we're going to break down yesterday's victory up at Norwich. I think it's thrown up a few interesting talking points. We're going to talk about Leandro Trossard as a striker, which at times has worked, and at times, if we're being brutally honest, hasn't. And I'm a little bit torn on whether that's the right thing for us moving forward, obviously, given the injury problems that we currently have. And obviously, all the focus is on PSG at the minute. And with Thomas Partey suspended, you feel like there's a good chance Trossard plays there because Merino is more than likely going to drop into the midfield. So we got that to talk about. We're also going to talk about Gabriel Martinelli, why it's important to stick with players even when they're going through difficult patches, because he's been in great form of late. We're going to talk Mikel Merino. Has Martin Ødegaard played his way back into form? We're going to do all of that. There's lots and lots to break down, and we're going to get a load of your questions from the live chat and a load of your thoughts as well. I do want to caveat everything that we're about to say on today's podcast with the point that Ipswich are rubbish. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean it in the sense of when you're talking about players potentially having played their way back into form, when you're talking about players playing in certain positions. And in the instance of Trossard, I think there's been debate recently about whether that works because it worked against Ipswich. I don't think that makes it a given that, you know, this is something that we should persist with. So that's kind of the point I want to make. And that's why I wanted to put that caveat in there. Ipswich are really, really bad. And, you know, they will be relegated. Leicester were confirmed relegated yesterday. Southampton a few weeks back. So, yeah, the standard right down at the bottom of the Premier League is really, really, really low. And let's not gloss over that. That's the truth. Just a quick disclaimer before we dive into the main content of today's pod. I'm feeling really under the weather today. I'm sneezing a lot. I've got tissues at the ready if I need to sneeze into something. I've also got a hot drink that I'll be sipping on. I will endeavor to hit the mute button if I feel a sneeze coming on, but just as a warning, and if one of them slips through the cracks, I am sorry. But the show must go on, as they say. Okay, should we start off then with the team that Mikel Arteta selected to face Ipswich at Portman Road? So I think we all felt that there was going to be some rotation. I think most people expected a little bit more rotation than we actually saw. Now, listen, PSG is not our next game. So, you can understand why if you're Mikel Arteta, you're probably sitting there going, look, obviously I want to protect these players and obviously I want to look after them. But we've still got a job to do in the Premier League in terms of consolidating our position. Momentum's really important. I don't want to give that up by chopping and changing too much. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things to consider. We've obviously got a game in midweek against Crystal Palace. Then we have no game next weekend, I believe. Is that right? Let me just double check that. Hold on. I don't want to give you guys wrong information. I've been a little bit out of the loop with things the last couple. Yeah, look. So we got Palace on Wednesday. Then there's no game at the weekend. And then obviously we play PSG on the 29th. So maybe Palace is the one that you look at rotating a little bit for. And obviously for Palace, they've got a FA Cup semi-final coming up at the weekend as well. So you might see Oliver Glasner look at it and go, you know what, we're safe. Let's shake it all around a little bit and maybe we go a little bit under strength too. Who knows? But anyway, on the Arsenal team, it was Raya in goal. White came in at right back and he's in desperate need of the minutes, you feel. Saliba and Kivor continued at centre back and Miles Lewis-Skelly was replaced in the 11 by Alexander Zinchenko. Thomas Partey dropped out of the team. Mikel Merino dropped back into midfield. Trossard came in. He came in at centre forward. And Martinelli and Saka played either side of him. So 3 changes from the side that started in the Bernabeu on Wednesday night. I expected there to be more. And I did hear some commentary and some comments in the lead up to the game from sort of ex-Arsenal players and various other people in the media who were saying, look, I can't believe Mikel Arteta's playing Saliba, for instance. If Saliba gets injured, they're up shit street. Can't believe he's playing Declan Rice. Can't believe he's playing Bukayo Saka. I think, especially in the case of Bukayo Saka, he still needs building up. He's still not at his absolute maximum. And you do run a risk when you play him in games that you don't see as being that important versus the PSG game, for example. And obviously, we kind of got a bit of a scare with Bukayo Saka when he was the subject of a really heavy challenge, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But I'm a believer in momentum. I believe that you got to, as Rumble says, my God, me and Rumble are going to agree. You got to keep the players ticking over. You can't just not play. You can't just say to them, go and sit at London Colney, wrap yourselves up in cotton wool and don't worry about any competition apart from the games against PSG, because there's always that risk of you going in cold into those games and not being at your best. On top of that, if you don't play and your body doesn't stay warm and doesn't stay conditioned, then you run a greater risk of injuries, which would be, typical of our luck this season. So there's a lot of factors here, but I'm okay with the team that he picked. I think it's about managing the minutes of these players in game. So ideally, there's a few of them that you'd rather play something like, I don't know, half an hour. 60 minutes rather than 90 minutes. So you give them a breather of half an hour. You leave an extra half an hour in the tank. Are these players going to need to play at 100% when they play against Ipswich Town? Now, I would argue no. And it goes back to the point I made right at the top of the pod. Ipswich are really poor. So it did feel like it was a bit of an exhibition match at times yesterday. It was a bit of a training session. We had to deal with some really heavy Ipswich Town challenges. I was surprised by that. I didn't think they were that type of team, but clearly they are. Clearly the frustration of where they find themselves has got to them a little bit. And yeah, we had to be on red alert when it came to the potential of picking up injuries. But I don't think as a team we particularly exerted ourselves or needed to exert ourselves in order to get the desired result. If we look at some of the changes that Mikel Arteta made, obviously Saka went off before the hour mark, which for me was perfect. Same with Mikel Merino. He's played a lot of football lately. He's had to, and he's worked tirelessly when he's played. You saw Declan Rice go off and Gabriel Martinelli go off with about, 17 minutes to go. And we got Leandro Trossard off, who's played less football with 6 minutes to go. So Mikel Arteta clearly mindful of the fact that some of those players have played a lot recently and he was willing to protect them. And as I say, protection doesn't always mean they don't feature and don't play at all. But it can mean that they're substituted off a little bit earlier than they normally would be. And I think that's probably the right way to do it. That's the way to find the balance between still getting the results that you want and that you need, still keeping those players in the tip-top shape that you want them to be going into the biggest of matches, but also not pushing them harder than they need to be pushed, essentially. So, yeah, I was okay with the team. As I say, I expected probably a little bit more rotation, but we didn't see that. That's fine. Now, Arsenal obviously broke the deadlock pretty early on in this game, 14 minutes. I got to be honest, it was Easter Sunday yesterday, which for the Greek culture, Greek Orthodox Christians, it's a really big deal. To us, it's bigger than Christmas. We always make a big song and dance about it. It's a family thing, barbecues, all the rest of it. We were kind of, I don't want to say half watching the game because I was paying more attention than that, but we were outside, we were cooking barbecues, we had a screen outside, we were watching the game, but I had to come home and watch the game back in full late on at night once everybody had gone to bed to really kind of make sure that I got a good, solid enough understanding of how things went down so that I could present a podcast this morning. And what I kind of took away from it initially was pretty similar to what my second watch told me. There's a few points that I want to make and that we're going to get into, but I touched on the Trossard thing, and Trossard sort of playing in that false 9/striker role. And obviously he had a really good impact from that position yesterday with his kind of instinctive finishing. And these are things that we know that Leandro Trossard has in the locker. I just feel sometimes when we face up against low blocks, Leandro Trossard's, I don't want to make it sound like I'm being horrible here, but Leandro Trossard's size doesn't really help him in that I don't think he's able to really kind of command those areas. I don't think he's able to win some of the duels that, for instance, a Kai Havertz or a Mikel Merino could win because he just doesn't have the frame, right? You deal with the tools that you've been given. And, he's great at other stuff. I think his finishing is fantastic. I said at various points last season that I thought that Leandro Trossard was probably the best finisher in the Arsenal squad. And on yesterday's evidence, you probably argue that that's still the case. I do feel sometimes Leandro Trossard struggles for rhythm. And I think we've certainly seen that this season. He scored twice yesterday, and those were only his 8th and 9th goals of the campaign. Now, I normally expect more from Leandro Trossard. I know he doesn't get the minutes that some of the others do, but I think normally, you'd back Leandro Trossard to deliver a little bit more. So it has been a bit of an underwhelming season from him, but the finishes yesterday were just a reminder, weren't they, of what Leandro Trossard can do. The first one, he's off balance. It looks like the opportunity to shoot has passed because he's been closed down. But instead, he sort of, on the fall, spots the gap between the defender's legs and goes for it. And, the goalkeeper struggles as a result of it, going through the defender's legs. And it's not far in the corner, but it's still enough to beat the goalkeeper and put Arsenal 1-0 up. Look at his second goal. Again, he gets the ball inside the box. Angle isn't great, but the minute he shifts it onto that right foot, he's only got one thing in mind. And Leandro Trossard, when he plays instinctively like that, I think is at his best. I think sometimes we overplay. We've talked about that before. And sometimes when we're facing those low blocks that we're trying to pull from side to side and it's not happening fast enough, Leandro Trossard, especially in that 9 role, can get a little bit lost. He was good yesterday, really, really good. And remember, we're going to bring you player ratings on the Patreon side of things. So we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail over there. The second goal came from Gabriel Martinelli, and this was my favorite goal of the bunch. Brilliant football. Mikel Merino's flick was fantastic. Was he trying to pick out Martinelli or was he trying to steer it into the far corner? I guess we'll never really know, but it doesn't really matter, does it? Because he's teed it up brilliantly for Gabby Martinelli, who scored his 50th goal for the club. That's a significant milestone. I did read yesterday that he is, I think, the 4th youngest player ever to reach 50 goals for Arsenal. So, it's a great milestone for him, a significant milestone for him. And I think, again, I'm talking a lot about reminders in recent weeks because I do think it's been a really difficult season. Like, we came into it with such high expectations. So much of what we hoped for hasn't come to fruition. And it's very easy to kind of get bogged down in that and forget about all of the good things and focus on the bad things and the negatives and the disappointments. But you you look at what we've done against Real Madrid, right, over those two legs. You look at the form that Gabby Martinelli's been in recent weeks. And these things are reminders of what Arsenal are and are capable of. And for me, it's really, really important that when those reminders come up, you highlight them and you flag them. Because, for example, there's been a lot of talk about Gabby Martinelli this year. Not good enough, need to upgrade in that position. And listen, I've felt that at times as well. I'm not digging people out or saying that people are wrong to feel that at the time. You can't help what you feel in certain scenarios and in certain situations. But what I will say is that Gabriel Martinelli is a great example of what can happen if you stick with a player. And we've had to stick with him largely because we haven't had alternatives. But, he is performing, he's scoring goals, he's influencing games. That work rate, that desire to help the team, it never waned at any real point. And I'm delighted to see him sort of getting the reward for that. People will argue it's too little, too late, and that we needed more from him during the period of Bukayo Saka's absence and all the rest of it. But listen, stuff doesn't always work out the way you want it to. And more so in football than probably any other sport, where there are so many variables at play. I'm just delighted to see him sort of hitting tip-top form again, because he's a fantastic player. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him a couple of times post-match, and I've always found him to be a really humble and really switched-on young man who's desperate to succeed. And so I'm delighted that things are going a little bit better for him at the moment. Obviously, the fourth goal, I've touched on Trossard's second finish, so I won't dwell on that too much. But the fourth goal, Ethan Nwaneri's effort, took a couple of ricochets on the way in. Not his finest goal by any stretch of the imagination, but he was in that kind of trademark Ethan Nwaneri space. He gets the shot off, takes a couple of ricochets, ends up in the back of the net. Fantastic. And even though it's not the kind of goal that is going to be talked about for months to come or years to come, like some of the previous Ethan Nwaneri finishes and goals, it is one that I think he needed. I think with Bukayo Saka coming back, Ethan Nwaneri's become a bit lost. And that's because there was all this hype and excitement around him. And listen, he is beyond where he should be at this age. Make no mistake about that. Ethan Nwaneri is further down the progression line as a footballer than he should be given his age. He's been fantastic since coming into the team. It has dropped off a little bit, the level, but that was always going to happen. We said that repeatedly. He's a young man finding his feet, developing. Consistency is the hardest thing to produce in football. And often it's the younger players who haven't figured out necessarily, their path yet that struggle to nail that. And Martinelli is one of those people. So Nwaneri I'm talking about. What am I going back to Martinelli for? Got Gabby on my mind. Nwaneri's a young lad and he's going to have ups and downs. And so while I was never particularly concerned by the slight dip that we've seen from him in recent weeks, I do feel like the goal that he scored, albeit a little bit fortuitous, will do him good. It's just a kind of reminder to people that, and I'm talking a lot about reminders, that he's still here, that he can still impact, that he can still contribute. But more importantly than that, because I don't think there were any fans necessarily out there writing him off or being hypercritical of him, I think more important than any of that, it's a reminder to him that he belongs at this level. He belongs in this first team, and he'll feel really, really great about that for sure. I do want to talk about some individuals. There's a fair bit to get into. I want to talk about Kivor. I want to talk about Odegaard. I want to talk about Mikel Merino in detail. Rice at the 6. We've got a lot to get into still on today's episode of the pod, but we are going to take a very, very short pause. Don't go anywhere. We've got all of that to come right after this short break.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
You heard the man. Like and subscribe to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. I think when I hit the live button this morning, we were about 30 odd subscribers away from 39,000. Now, once we get to 39, we're on the path to 40. So I'd love to get there sooner rather than later. If you are watching but not subscribed, well, why not? Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Leave us a like on the video. Those really, really do help too. Plus, remember, we've got a Patreon offering here at the Chronicles of Aguna. We're going to bring you player ratings from yesterday's game shortly after we finish up here. It'll be available about 15-20 minutes after we wrap up here on the live side of things. So you can go over there. You can get access to our additional content. Plus, you get ad-free episodes. So I know for a lot of our podcast listeners, for a lot of our YouTube viewers, you get those baked-in ads that are put in by the platforms. Well, you won't get any of that if you listen to the show via Patreon. So if you're interested in that, go over, check it out. No pressure, obviously. But if you'd love to support, we'd really, really love to have your support. And a big thank you to everybody who's signed up recently, because we've had a fair few people join in since we started bringing you content from Madrid, which is amazing. So thank you so much for that. Okay, shall we talk Declan Rice, because he had to play a slightly different role yesterday. It feels like it's been forever that we've been discussing whether Declan Rice is an 8 or a 6. The truth is, guys, he's both. He can do both. And in a situation like yesterday where, Thomas Partey was felt needed a bit of a breather, Declan Rice dropped into that 6 position. What I will say is, I think if Jorginho was available, he probably plays. So I think Rice being deployed there was partly down to Jorginho's absence. It was as much down to that as it was about Declan Rice's ability to play there. But Declan can do it. He can do it. There's no question about that. He's very multifunctional. It seems to be my word of the week. I've used it a lot, but I think never has it been more true when talking about this Arsenal side. And it's just great to see him sort of slot into that role so seamlessly. Again, I'll caveat this by saying, look, it was Ipswich Town, and Ipswich Town aren't very good. And Ipswich Town make the lives of a lot of teams easy, hence why they are where they are. But maybe it's nice to see Rice get that opportunity ahead of the PSG game, where he's probably going to have to play that role. Because, look, he's been super impactful for Arsenal playing in those more advanced positions recently, certainly against Real Madrid. But I think for me, you look at Partey's suspension, you look at the fact that it's unlikely Jorginho is going to come back. It's actually a good thing that he got a run out back in that position. Yeah, it's a position that he's played for the majority of his career, and so he's used to it. It's not alien to him. It's not new. But sometimes it's nice to get to dust off the cobwebs ahead of a game where you're going to be asked to play that role. And given the size and the magnitude of the game, it's good to see that. So, it didn't teach me anything about Declan Rice. I haven't learned anything about his ability to play in that position. We knew he could do it. Doesn't play it quite the same way that Partey does. Doesn't play it quite the same way that Jorginho does. I've always said it. He's more of a carrier than a passer for me from that deep position. But I think against Ipswich, you get away with it. Against Crystal Palace, if that's the way we go, you probably get away with it as well. But not only does Rice playing there give him the opportunity to dust off the cobwebs, it gives Mikel Merino the chance to readjust again. And again, this is a player that's played as an 8 for such a long time, and it's not like he's forgotten how to do it. It's like riding a bike, right? You never forget it. But sometimes you get out of the habit of stuff. And so for both of them, I thought it was quite useful, actually, that they were deployed in those positions ahead of a game, a huge game coming up in just over a week's time, that they're probably going to have to play in those roles. So, yeah, good stuff there. I do want to talk a little bit about Jakub Kivor. I thought Jakub Kivor, again, was really, really good. Not that he was tested a great deal, but he just seems to be playing with this confidence and this swagger that we've never seen from Jakub Kivor before. He's never had the rhythm. He's never had the opportunity to play week after week after week in his preferred position. He had a good long run at left back previously, and he done okay in that run. But I think we always looked at him and thought, yeah, it's quite a drop off between him and Gabriel. I still think Gabriel's better than him. I'm not sitting here for a second saying that in the biggest of biggest games, I would play Jakub Kivor over Gabriel. But my God, he's stepped up. And there'll be people out there, and our good friend Jid in the chat is often very defensive of Jakub Kivor. And, you've had your moment because he's been really, really good. But you've got to be honest and say, that there'll be very few people out there that believe that he was capable of this level of performance. I'm not going to judge him based on the Ipswich game, but based on those Real Madrid games, he was just truly superb, man. Just truly superb. Fantastic. Really, 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 really good. Okay, shall we move on to who was I talking about? Kivor. Let's move on to Martin Ødegaard. Sorry, I lost my trail of thought. Did he look like he was back to something like his best yesterday? The way he dictated the game, the way he sort of, went into that half space, but really kind of made things happen, popping the ball off that little bit early and not taking those extra touches. Yeah, I thought it was really, really good yesterday. Again, I'll caveat it with the point it was Ipswich Town, but I quite liked his performance yesterday. And again, are we going to see the benefit over the next few weeks of Mikel Arteta sticking with someone who he values, who's really, really important? Yeah, I think he was really, really good yesterday in a lot of ways. But the guy that I want to spend the most time talking about, the guy that I really want to focus on before we wrap up today's pod, is Mikel Merino. Not in my wildest dreams did I think that Mikel Merino was this good. Now, this goes back to before we signed him. I remember doing a podcast and expressing, I don't know, I would call it a concern, because that sounds like I was writing the guy off. I wasn't. But I did look at him and I did at times think, is he the right guy? Like, is he all round good enough to be what we need him to be? I sort of looked at him based on the Euros as this guy that would just arrive at the far post. And there was a part of me that felt like, and I say arrive at the far post, I mean from that 8 position. There was a part of me, right, with Mikel Merino that looked at it and went, are we so obsessed with this idea of our left 8 arriving at the far post that we've opted for someone who can, yes, do that, but maybe whose all-round game isn't quite at the level that we need it to be? That's kind of how I felt at the beginning. And over time, he'd come into the team. Obviously, he had a disrupted start. Let's not forget about that. It would be remiss of me not to make that point, because I think it's really important, really difficult to get started at a club when in a freak training ground incident, you end up doing your shoulder the way that he did, right? So take that into consideration. But I never really got Mikel Merino. I didn't really understand Mikel Merino. Now, that's not because he's a bad player. It's because my understanding was lacking. Or you could argue that he failed to show all of this stuff right at the start, or that he needed a bit of time. He needed an adaptation period, etc., etc. But what do I see now when I look at Mikel Merino? I see someone who's enjoying his football. I see someone who is multifunctional, who is very, very competent in the final third, but is also able to kind of flick that switch and become a midfielder again, and, support the team structurally, support the team defensively, who uses his big frame to great advantage. He's not your typical Spanish midfielder, Mikel Merino, right? Okay. Has he got a good technical level? I'd argue he has. And we've seen that in particular with some of his finishing since moving into that centre forward role. But I guess the thing with Mikel Merino is that he can at times be a little bit of an eyesore. And because of that, I think you overlook some of the really good and positive aspects of his game. At least that's how I felt at the beginning. But as he's growing in confidence, as he's finding his feet, as he's more and more accustomed to what it is that Mikel Arteta wants from him, to what it is that he's going to get from his teammates, to how he can support them, we have seen a massive, massive upturn. And all of a sudden, this signing that people were probably in a lot of cases on the fence about before it happened, that people were questioning 3-4 months into his Arsenal career, all of a sudden, this bit of business looks like a really, really good one. We talked about it on the podcast the other day. Mikel Arteta is a problem solver, and he likes players that aid him in that. And Mikel Merino is one of those players. Kai Havertz is one of those players as well. Players that, as I keep saying, are multifunctional, are intelligent, because football intelligence and football IQ here is really, really important. You can't adapt from one position to the other as well as Merino has, or as well as Kai Havertz has at times, or Ben White, or Jurriën Timber, or Rice, various others that, have come in with the idea of them being one thing and ended up being something else. You can't do that without a really good footballing IQ. So when you think about Mikel Merino and you think about what it was that attracted Mikel Arteta to him in terms of going out and signing him, it is that multifunctionality. It is that attitude, which is a good attitude. It is that intelligence. All of these things are really, really important. And then add the physical element, which again is something that we know Mikel Arteta is big on. And it makes sense now why Mikel wanted to sign him. Has it taken me a bit of time to catch up in terms of understanding all the reasons why he wanted him? Yeah. I thought I understood part of the reason when we first brought him. And as we sort of saw him at the beginning of his Arsenal career, when he finally was fit to play, you did start to see elements of why you felt that Mikel wanted him. But I don't think we fully understood what his value to the group would be and what his value to the team would be until recently. Now, even still, even despite all of that, when everybody's fit and available, Mikel Merino don't start for me. But that's okay. He was brought in to enhance the squad and to enhance the group, to bring us something different. He's done exactly that. He's done exactly that. So yeah, I'm delighted with what we've seen from him. I think he's been really, really good. He's been a huge, huge positive in recent weeks. And yeah, fantastic. Fantastic to see. Okay, just running through my list of stuff that I wanted to touch on. I think I've covered pretty much everything. If you've got a couple of questions, chuck them in the live chat. We'll do that before we wrap up. And then we're going to be going over to the Patreon side of things to record those player ratings, which will be available to you guys in the next 20 to 30 minutes. I'll just quickly summarize my thoughts on yesterday's game while you guys stick a couple of questions in the live chat. Not quite as much rotation as I expected, just the 3 changes, but I don't feel like anybody apart from Bukayo Saka. That's what I didn't talk about, that tackle. Let's just quickly do that. What a horrendous tackle that is from Leif Davis. You know what? These things happen in football, right? That's a nasty one down the back of the Achilles. Unfortunately, that's going to happen. Where I get really, really frustrated is when I don't see officials taking steps to protect players against that kind of shit. And thankfully, and finally, we saw an official willing to just go, no, mate, that is bad. Off you go. I was obviously concerned for Bukayo Saka. When I watched the replays back, it looked to me like a sore one, rather than anything that we've got to worry about for the future. I think it's going to swell up. I think it's going to be bruised. I think it's going to be uncomfortable, and maybe I'd leave Bukayo Saka out of the game against Crystal Palace on Wednesday night. But yeah, I mean, it's just a shit challenge, isn't it? But thankfully, as I say, one of the officials was willing to just go over and deal with it. You gotta clamp that stuff out, man, because we talk a lot about the game lacking those flair players nowadays. And, we don't get those mavericks anymore. We don't have people going on dribbles as often as we did in the past. And instead, it's all become a little bit robotic. Well, when players are subject to that sort of treatment, it is going to discourage them from playing the type of football that we all want to see. And so I was really, really pleased to see Kavanagh go over and show the red card, because it just had to happen. It had to be that, we weren't the only ones banging this drum again, because, for long periods this season, we've complained, and rightly so, with every right, by the way, about certain things. And it's felt like there's been a complete unwillingness to take on board what we're actually complaining about. Like, call someone a complainer and a moaner and have a go at them, but actually think about what they're complaining about. Think about what they're moaning about. Do they have a point? We absolutely have a point with some of the challenges that we've been on the receiving end of. In particular, Bukayo Saka, who has been on the receiving end of those things for years and years and years. So to see a referee take such decisive action, I think, is the silver lining from that situation. I don't think it's going to keep Bukayo Saka out. I think he's going to be okay. But would I rest him against Palace? Maybe. just as a precaution. Let's see. But yeah, good to see the officials take decisive action on that. Okay, so very, very quickly on that summary. Not as much rotation as expected, but I don't feel like we overexerted ourselves, so I'm okay with that. Trossard showed those instincts in front of goal that I think we all knew were there, but haven't maybe been as prevalent this season as in previous years. The challenge on Saka was disgusting. Great to see the officials take decisive action. Nwaneri scored a goal, a couple of ricochets, but he needed that, I feel, and it will do him good. Martinelli got his 50th goal for Arsenal, which is a great milestone to hit, and I think he becomes the 4th youngest player to achieve that in Arsenal history. Proof of what happens when you stick with players, even when they're going through difficult patches of form. Jakub Kivor is playing with a confidence and a swag that we've never seen before, which is amazing to see. It's amazing what confidence can do, and it serves as a reminder to people who maybe sometimes don't factor that in. Confidence, rhythm, really, really important things in the game. Mikel Merino is a really good footballer, a really intelligent, robust footballer who offers multifunctionality, and who a lot of us, myself included, I've got to eat some humble pie, were wrong about when he first came in. So all of that is brilliant to see. Remember, you can sign up to the Chronicles of a Gooner patrons should you so wish. You'll get access to additional content and ad-free episodes. Plus, subscribe to the channel on YouTube if you haven't done so already. All of that really, really does help. We're trying to start building towards our next big milestone. If you haven't left a like, do it. If you're listening on audio, leave us a review. Let's take a couple of your questions before we sign off. Let's take this one from Jid. With the injuries we've had this season and the way cover and squad players have stepped up, what's your revised list of players you think we should move on at the end of the season? So my opinion on Kivor is on its way to changing. I would have said that he probably needed to move on prior to this run of games. So, you know, his performances have had an impact on my opinion there. I still think Zinchenko needs to move on. I think Tierney's going anyway. Aside from that, there's not anyone else that I'm kind of desperate to move on. I've got a feeling that Leandro Trossard might move on. I would say Nathan Butler-Oyedeji, who came on, probably needs to go because he's not going to get the game time that he needs at that age to further develop in his career. But yeah, that's it. You know, Calafiori and Tomiyasu are incredibly frustrating with the volume of injuries they pick up. But do I want them gone? Not necessarily. I just want them fit. So I'd say, yeah, for me, the list is shrinking a little bit. But, you know, football doesn't work that way. You know, I might look at Kivor or, you know, Zinchenko and say, well, you know, it's good to have them because they can come in from time to time and do a job. But those guys might not be satisfied with that role and they might want more, in which case a transfer becomes a more viable outcome. So, yeah, we got to wait and see, right? But those are the ones that come to mind initially. Tom says, with Jorginho and Partey certainly leaving this summer, will we be too short even with a Zubimendi signing? Who would you want us to bring in to complete our midfield? Yeah, that's a really, really good question. You know, there was a hint that Arsenal were going to try and get Thomas Partey to stay, but then that was kind of shut down by some reports that followed yesterday, I think, in which it was said that no, he's expected to go, as is Jorginho. Zubimendi, I'm on the fence about. I'm not saying that means he's not good enough. I was on the fence about Mikel Merino, and now I love the guy. It can happen. But I do think even if Zubimendi comes in, we do need another one. Who that would be, I couldn't give you an answer right now because I'd need to go away and think about that and do a little bit of scouting and a little bit of research and analysis. But I do think if we lose Jorginho and Partey, we need 2 midfielders. I do wonder if Lewis Skelly will be considered as a midfield option. I'm not saying that he's going to move permanently from left back to central midfield, but obviously he's got that ability to play there. So I wonder if that's something that they'll look at. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think it'll be too long before Max Daumann is in the picture of the first team, but I don't think he's going to sit deep in your midfield. So it's probably not a direct replacement, but just in terms of bodies and numbers around that midfield area, I do wonder if he'll be considered as well. But it's a really, really good question. I guess I can't give you a midfielder right now because I'd want to go and sit and look into it rather than just throwing a name out there. But what I will say is this: Zubimendi, alone is not enough if we lose both of those players, for sure. For sure. Okay, let's take one more. Kevin Amasa says, what's your midfield and attack against PSG, considering Partey is out? Now, we're going to do a preview show where we'll look into that in a lot more depth closer to the time, because my mind will probably change 10, 15 times by then. But at the minute, it's Rice at the 6, Merino and Ødegaard as the 8s, Trossard up front, Martinelli and Saka either side. That's what I've got in my head right now. I think that's what we're most likely to go with. But yeah, time will tell. Time will tell. Hopefully we don't have any more spanners thrown in the works that require a kind of shift or change of strategy between now and then. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, bright and early on this Monday morning. I hope you have a wonderful day. Hope you've had a great Easter weekend so far. Patreons, you'll get your player ratings bit in about 20-25 minutes, so stay tuned for that. And this episode will be going up on there as well in ad-free format. So, yeah, if you're a patron, check it out. Enjoy. If you're not a patron and you want to become one, the link is in the description below. Leave a like on the YouTube video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're listening on audio, leave us a review. I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Up the